Hello YouTube, this is Garwin with another video. Today's video I'm going to show you how to set up a Rust server on a Windows-based PC. Now Rust is available, both the server and the client, natively for Windows and Linux PCs, and I will do a video later on how to set up a Rust server on a Linux box, because as you can see I actually host mine on my Linux box. But for today I'm going to show you how to do it on Windows, since that's going to be what the majority of you are actually going to be playing the game on. So if you do a Google or Bing search for host your own Rust server, you will come across this link on rustified.com, how to host your own Rust server. And this walkthrough is pretty easy to follow. It's pretty straightforward and to the point. And if you follow this walkthrough, you will get your server up, or you should get your server up without any issues. I'm just going to show you visually how to go through the process and some things that you may want to check and some further instructions on how to maybe forward ports on your router if you want to open the game server up to other people outside of your home, etc. So the first thing this walkthrough says we need to do is we need to create two folders, one for Steam CMD and one for the server. And it gives some examples here. We're not going to put them straight on the root C drive. We're going to put them in my downloads folder here. So let's make one for Steam CMD and one for the Rust server itself. And the next step is to download Steam CMD for Windows. So we're going to download this, but we're going to download it into the folder we made for Steam CMD. Extract the contents of the zip file to the folder you created. So we just need to drop into here, right click this, and extract all if you don't have anything else installed, or since I have 7-zip, I'm just going to say extract here. Alrighty, execute the steamcmd.exe program. Now you just double click this and it's going to update itself, and eventually it'll drop you into a sort of command line looking interface. But this is not DOS. This is actually a command line interface for Steam. Alright, so we're now at the Steam CMD command line interface. After it's done, you'll receive the Steam prompt. And here's how you actually install the Rust dedicated server. So the first step is we're going to say login space anonymous. We're going to say force underscore install underscore dir space quotation mark. And since we did not put our folder in the root C drive, we need to have the path to our Rust server folder. So we're going to copy, and then when you right click in this command line window, it's going to paste that path that you just copied. And then we're going to end quote, and let's make sure, alright, that's all of that line. Hit enter. Now we're going to do app underscore update 258550. Now that number refers to the Rust server application. There are various different applications available for Steam CMD, and they each have their own unique code. The one for the Rust server is 258550. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter, and it will begin downloading and installing the Rust server software, and it may take a while depending on your computer and the speed of your internet connection. Alright, after you are returned to the Steam command prompt here, we can go ahead and scroll down to the next step, which is just to run the command quit, which exits. And now during this process, if you would actually like to use a beta server, you actually have those options here, but we're just going to do the standard stable release version of the server. So we'll scroll on down. We're going to make our batch script file, and all you have to do to make your batch script is just open Notepad. And in Notepad we're going to copy and paste what is written here. However, we're going to do things a little bit differently here, and I'll explain why. Alright, we're going to go ahead and keep this in case we change our minds about this later. All this does is allow us to return to this point later if we want to. And on this line, we need to modify this because this is executing steamcmd, but if you remember, we didn't put steamcmd in the C directory. We put it in my downloads folder. So we need to copy this folder path over top of this so that it actually points to where steamcmd is located. And we need to change this one to the Rust server folder. So we're going to copy that path over top of this piece where it says C:\Rust server. We're going to replace that with the actual location of my Rust server. And so it's going to execute steamcmd, log in, and then check for updates to the server software, and then quit steamcmd. So basically every time we run this to start the server, it's going to check for updates before it actually starts the server. And then this right here is the meat and potatoes of this script. This is actually what launches the Rust dedicated server. So we need to go through here. Let me see. The server seed you can change if you like to. You can Google valid, seed numbers. The seed is essentially, the world is procedurally generated. It's sort of randomized, and the seed is essentially a number that it uses in that randomization process. And so you can leave it at default, or you can put whatever you want in here. We're going to make ours say 8287, my birthday. Server.world size, we're going to leave it default. Server.max players, this is how many people are going to be allowed to log into your server at any given time. We're going to leave it at the default of 10. But if you need more or want to restrict it even further, you can change this value. Server.hostname, this is going to be the what is the name of the server is when you find it in the game browser in Rust itself. So we're going to say Garowin's test server. Server description, this is going to be the description, so that whenever somebody actually clicks on your server in the game browser and it brings up that little smaller window with information about it, the description is going to be shown underneath the server host name. So we're going to say this server is just a test. Server URL and server header image. If you are running this server on behalf of a group or an organization, such as if it was the official IGN Rust server or whatever, or if I wanted to make it the official Kentucky Nerd Rust server, I would change this to reflect the website for Kentucky Nerd live podcast, and I would host the header image would probably be the Kentucky Nerd logo hosted somewhere, and I would point to that image here. Since we're not doing that, we're actually just going to delete these two arguments altogether. Server identity, server 1, this is not important unless you're running multiple servers on the same PC. We're not, so we're just going to leave it alone, and it's going to make a folder named server 1 with all of our stuff in it. Archon port, Archon password, and Archon web 1. What this is, this allows Archon, which is essentially what I'm doing with this. It allows me to connect remotely to this Rust server and issue commands to that Rust server remotely. And so if this is something that you would be interested in, say if you're running a dedicated server and you're actually going to be playing your game on another machine, this is something that you might find useful. And it runs on a different port, and we can change the password to just say my name. And then we're going to say save as. We're going to go into downloads. We're going to go into Rust server. We're going to change this to all files, and we're going to name this to startrust.bat. The reason you want to change this to all files is if you leave it as text, even if you put .bat here, it'll just name the file startrust.bat.txt, and Windows will still see it as a text file. So when you double click it, all it'll do is just open it up in Notepad so you can edit it. So change save as type to all files and name it whatever you want to name it, .bat, and we're going to go ahead and hit save. And the reason I left out line 5 here is this actually makes this script a loop. So if the server crashes, or even if you manually quit the server, the next thing it's going to do in that script, it's going to go back up here check for updates, and restart the server. Now this is good for redundancy. You know, if the server crashes unexpectedly and you're not there to manually reboot it, this should automatically restart it. But if I quit the server manually, I don't want it to automatically try and restart it while I'm doing stuff. So I'm going to leave line 5 out. You can put it in if you want to, but I'm not going to. And then on down here, this basically explains everything I just explained to you, maybe in a little bit more detail, so you may want to read through this. And then this is it. So we're going to go ahead and close this. We're going to open the Rust server folder. We're not going to run Rust dedicated. We're going to run the one we just made, Start Rust. And it may try to update the Rust server software a second time, but no. Okay, so here it says it's already up to date. So it should go ahead and start the server and let us know when it's ready. Now while this is starting, you can see it just created a new folder here called Server. And there's another one here called Server 1. This is what I was talking about, the server identity. If you're running multiple servers on the same machine, you're going to have multiple batch scripts for those different servers, and you'll change the identity, so you can have like Server 1, Server 2, whatever. We've only got the one. And this is going to be where it stores all of the log files, the configuration variables, things of that nature. There's not much in here right now because it's literally spawning the world for the first time. So let's go ahead and let it finish, and I'll show you guys how to do some management after it's started. Alright, so you can see here it now says server startup complete. The Bradley APC spawned at these coordinates. And so now you can see down here in the bottom right we have the server frame rate, the uptime, and just some general information. And this is actually an interactive console, so you can actually run commands here and get information from the server, or do things. You could say player list, and you can see there's nobody logged in at the moment. So now let's go ahead and log into our server. I don't have Steam going, so let's go ahead and open Steam. And while that's going on, we're going to go ahead and click our start button and look for the Windows firewall, and we're going to click the Windows Defender firewall link, and we're going to hit allow an app or feature through the Windows Defender firewall, and we want to scroll down, and we want to make sure that Rust dedicated is allowed to connect at least on the private network here. If it's not checked in either of these boxes, you may need to click the change settings button and place a check mark in the private box and then hit OK. But we're good to go here. And let's go ahead and launch Rust. Alright, so Rust is up and going. So we're going to go ahead and click play game. And the first place I'm going to check is local network, and it's not here. Sometimes it doesn't show up. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to press the F1 key on our keyboard, and we're going to run client.connect space. Now, if the server is running on a different machine, you want to get the IP address for that machine. If you're running the server on the same computer that you're playing on, you just want to put localhost : 28015. Now, if it's running on a separate machine and you don't know the IP address to that computer, hold the Windows key on your keyboard and press the R button and run the command cmd, and then run the command ipconfig. This is on the computer that's hosting the Rust server, and you can see here that the IPv4 address is 10.1.1.15 for this computer. And so instead you could say, instead of saying localhost, if this were a separate machine, you could say 10.1.1.15:28015, because that's the port that the server is running on. So it's client.connect space IP to the server : 28015, the Rust port. And then we're going to go hit the enter key. We're going to hit F1 to close this terminal here, and we're going to let Rust load. Now, it's going to take a little while for the client to load the first time, since it has never loaded this world before, and Rust is notorious for taking forever to load anyway, so just be patient. Alrighty, now once it gets to this point where it says receiving data, it's about to log you into the server. And there we are. Now, let's go ahead and wake ourselves up here. Let's Alt-Tab over to the Rust client here, and you can see Garowin has entered the game. Now, at this point, you may want to make yourself an owner of your own server so that you can run commands from within the game, because there are some commands that you cannot run from this little admin console here. They have to be ran from within the game. So, for example, from this little console, I can give myself items. Let me see here. You can see I gave myself an AK-47, but I can't call in, say, an airdrop or a helicopter or things of that nature. Those have to be executed by you as a player within the game. So let's go ahead and Alt-Tab over here, and to bring up the console in-game, you can just hit the F1 key and run commands from here. So, let's say server.fps. There we go. So, to make yourself an owner of your server, you can see that my Steam 64-bit ID is this number right here. It's the one to the right of the / after my name. But if you don't know, or if you want to make someone a moderator, you can just say, run the command player list, and it will give you information about all of the players currently logged into that server. So, let's say we want to make ourselves an owner of our own server, because right now, over here, if we ran the command heli.drop, nothing would happen because we're not an owner of the server. So what we need to do, we need to run the command owner ID space that number there, 7656, and then space and the name that you want them to be called by. And then you just exit out of the game as that person, log back in, and you'll have the ability to be an owner and an admin in your own server. Now you can also add sort of subordinate moderators with the moderator ID command and the same syntax, you know, number here, name here, so on and so forth. Now, since we've made a change to the server from this console, and we don't want to go editing text files to make the changes permanent, we're going to run the command write cfg, which from what I can tell has to be run from this admin console, because when you run it in the game I don't get any output. So you want to run it here to make sure. Write cfg saves the current configuration, and then server.save manually saves the server and all player locations and things of that nature. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hit escape. Now, since we're connected to ourselves, our own private server, it's not named Amsterdam 2. This is not the correct description, and this is not, it doesn't have 223 people playing. This is just a sort of default that it displays if your server is not listed in the server list, and I'll show you how to get that to happen here in just a few minutes. But first, let's go ahead and disconnect, then reconnect to our own server, and test and make sure that our owner ID command actually worked. So let's go ahead and press the F1 key. We're going to say client.connect, and instead of typing my IP address, since it's on the same machine, we're going to say localhost : 28015, F1 to close the command terminal, and then we'll let the game load back up. Alright, so as you can see, it was much faster logging in the second time around. So let's hit space here. So now when we bring up the F1 command, we should be able to run certain commands like, say, no clip, which allows us to fly and travel through barriers and things. So now we are actually an owner on this server. We could say run God true, which gives ourselves invincibility. Heli.drop, which would drop a helicopter on us, which will shoot at us, but because we have God mode turned on, we're fine. So that has successfully, we have successfully made ourselves an owner. We have written the configuration to the server, so it is now, if the server has to be restarted, we will still be an owner. And so let's go ahead and cancel that. Let's try run disconnect. There we go. And hit F1 to... There we go. Close the terminal. Alright, so you can see it's got the little default thing here. Let's say we want other people to connect to us. Well, if they're on your same local network, say if it's your wife and kids, they can just run those client.connect commands as well and log into your server manually that way. But let's say you want it to show up on the actual server browser here. You can see I've actually got mine running here. Garowin's Rust server with a ping of 2. One person is currently logged in. The way you get that set up is actually nothing to do with the game itself. It's something to do with your router settings. Now, I have a Linksys router, and the end result of what you need to do is you need to reserve an IP address for the server, for the computer that is going to be running your Rust server, so that its IP address never changes. And then you need to forward the Rust port 28015 to that IP address. So I'm going to show you how that is done on my router, but if you're not running a Linksys router, if your firmware doesn't look like mine, you may need to do some Googling to figure out how to do this on your particular router. Alright, sorry for the interruption. This is video editor me. I was editing this video together and I realized I didn't actually explain how to get into your router settings if you maybe weren't the person who set it up to begin with. So we're going to do the same thing we did earlier. Hold the Windows key and press R. Run cmd. We're going to run the command ipconfig, all one word. And we're going to look for the default gateway. So the default gateway you can see is 10.1.1.1. Yours is probably different. It could be 192.168. something. But whatever it is, just punch that IP address into your web browser and hit enter. And there we are on the router configuration page. The administrative password and things of that nature is something that you would have set up when the router was plugged in. And if you've never set one up, now is as good a time as any to change the administrative password. But anyway, that is how you get to your router to make these configuration changes. So on my particular router, I'll have to remember here, is it under, let's go. Alrighty, so under the connectivity button, you click the local network tab, then you click the DHCP reservations button. And you can see here, these are the devices on my network that have reserved addresses. And as you can see, the device Adams-server has the IP address 10.1.1.2. So that computer always has that IP address 10.1.1.2. Now to reserve an IP address for a new device, let's say we wanted to reserve the IP address 10.1.1.15 so that my gaming PC always got the same IP address. We just click this button, add DHCP reservation, and click OK on my router. So if your router doesn't have a nifty little list here where you can just check a box and click add, if it actually just asks you to manually enter a MAC address, this is how you get the MAC address for your computer. So we're going to go ahead and hold the Windows key and press R. We're going to run the command cmd, bring up the command prompt again. Now we're going to run ipconfig space /all. Now you see you've got a lot more information located here. So what we need to do is we need to scroll up until we find our Ethernet adapter, Ethernet. It may be named something differently on your particular machine. The way to tell which one it is to look for the one that has this IP address, not 10.1.1.15, but the IP address that you had earlier. So let's say ipconfig. We can see that our IP address is 10.1.1.15. So we can scroll up here, find the adapter that has this IP address, and that'll tell us which one of these adapters is actually the correct one. Because you can see here, because I have VirtualBox, I've got some virtual adapters. We can just ignore all of that. This is the adapter that we want right here. And another thing you may notice is that it may actually have your ISP's domain name listed as like a DNS suffix. So the information we need from this is the physical address, and we're going to copy this physical address, and that is what you're going to use if you have to manually enter your MAC address in order to reserve an IP address on your router. So you can either use the fancy little list, check a box, add, OK, possibly reboot your router. If it doesn't have a little list and it asks you to enter a MAC address, this is how you find your MAC address. ipconfig /all, locate the appropriate network adapter that is actually connected to the internet for you, and then look for the physical address. That is your MAC address. Now, if this whole command prompt output is confusing to you and you can't seem to find the information you need, another way to find your physical address or MAC address or hardware address, whatever it's called, is to go down here on your Windows system tray, right click your network icon and click Open Network and Internet Settings. Now I'm using Windows 10. The exact way to find this may differ if you're using something else, but we're going to right click that, hit Open Network and Internet Settings. Then we're going to go down here to the bottom and we're going to click this little link that says View Your Network Properties, and you want to find your Ethernet adapter, which is in my case it's the main top one, and right here you see physical address with MAC in parentheses, and there's your MAC address. Now when you're typing in your MAC address, you want to make sure to format it the same way that your router has it formatted. Some things will separate the digits with a colon and some will separate them with a hyphen. Just to be on the safe side, if your router has it listed with a hyphen, replace the colons here with hyphens when you're typing it in. So the next thing you need to do is close these out, go to Security, and click Apps and Gaming. Now it's port forwarding, but it's under the Apps and Gaming tab. So we're going to go to Single Port Forwarding, and you can see here that I have Rust port 28015 forwarded to port 28015, and it's pointed to the IP address that is the server. So after you have reserved the IP address, forwarded that traffic, and then clicked Apply, OK, perhaps rebooted your server, you should be able to hit Refresh All in your game server list and see your game server listed properly. If you actually click on it, you'll actually get the description and things that you have put into that server's configuration. And like I said, you don't have to forward the ports and all that stuff. If you're just wanting to play by yourself, you can do it just like this and play on the same machine as long as you've got enough RAM and a powerful enough PC. Alright, so hopefully you will find this video helpful. We have gone over how to set up a Rust server on a Windows-based PC. We've gone over how to reserve an IP address, how to forward ports to that IP address, and we have logged into our server, run a few commands, save the configuration, things of that nature. The rest is really up to you. Just have fun and enjoy yourself. That's the point of the game. And if you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, or even suggestions regarding this video or for content you'd like to see in future videos, please feel free to post a comment in the comment section below or message me directly here on YouTube. And I will hopefully have another video on how to do this same sort of process on a Linux computer, since my server does in fact run on Linux. So as always, this is Garwin out. Y'all have a good one. So I just wanted to record a quick caveat here. I wanted to make a recommendation that if you're going to host the Rust server, that you have at least 4 gigabytes of RAM. It doesn't take a whole lot of processor power. This server, my Linux server, is actually hosting it just fine with an old dual-core AMD Athlon X2 running at like 2.1 gigahertz or 2.8 gigahertz or something like that, and 4 gigabytes of RAM, part of which is actually being shared for the integrated graphics, even though it's not even using them. But you need to have, I would highly recommend a minimum of 4 gigabytes of RAM, because it can turn into a RAM hog. I have seen it use almost all of this RAM. And as you can see over here, the one that we've got running on the Windows PC that we just set up for the purpose of this video, it's using a little over 2 gigabytes by itself, just the Rust server. And then Rust itself can use, I've seen Rust, when you turn the settings up, use 7 gigabytes of just RAM, not counting the graphics card RAM. So if you're going to run your server, I recommend at least having 4 gigabytes of RAM if you're just running a server. If you're going to run a server and game on that same PC, I really recommend you have a bare minimum of 8 gigabytes of RAM, preferably 16 gigabytes of RAM, just to be on the safe side. So I just wanted to throw that quick caveat out there that Rust can be a RAM hog. It doesn't take much CPU power to run the server daemon, but it does require quite a bit of RAM. So I just wanted to throw that out there.